I suppose, the challenge is being on residence anywhere really is that tension between being a tourist and a visitor, and knowing that because you're not from there and you're not a local, there's only really so much one can really understand and holistically get a sense of the nature of the place.
I found myself in Albany in November 2009. Diane was kind of introduced to me as my key contact for Albany, and I think we struck an immediate rapport, and that was part of, I think, the reason why I felt so integrated for someone who's actually there for such a short time. I mean, I did a lot of studio visits to lots of local artists, and I think people were aware of, some biographical information of who I was and why I was in town, and I think people were open to striking up a conversation with a complete stranger. I think that just makes it a level playing field, because we're not really having a conversation about a career, but it's more just about the why to make and how to make, and the things that does to you and your sense of identity, I suppose.
Through that process of getting to know the place and the people, it became quite apparent that the waterfront area was something that was very much in people's minds, because the development was underway by then. And it wasn't so much a conversation about what was taking place now, but it was in context to how the waterfront had been used in the past, and then of course its history and its connection to settlement. I suppose for me it became quite apparent that this was going to be probably the location in which I would make a work in response to, and so from that point on it became I suppose quite natural to think about the representation of that location at the public library in the historical collection upstairs. There's a key profile drawing of a profile of a coastline. That physical rendering of that profile of the coastline made me start to think about perhaps of Albany from the water.
Well, I was lucky enough to actually take the pilot boat, be a visitor on the pilot boat that leaves the port. We were parallel to the waterfront, which was, obviously in the reverse experience that I had had up until that point. So I think it was actually quite interesting that that point of view, metaphorically and physically actually articulates, my, as an outsider, as a visitor, looking in. There's a lots of amazing industry that still defines Albany too. So the refinery, with the big silos with the big mounds of silica sand, and of course between those two landmarks is the new kind of very contemporary architectural building that was being built for the Albany Entertainment Centre.
It made me think about not only the function of the waterfront, but its rich history and the way it was changing.
I think Mimi's project was a very sophisticated piece of work, and the way she installed it in the library was a sophisticated installation, and I think that in itself drew a lot of it. And probably people down here would not have seen a piece of artwork shown like that before. So Iasca is actually bringing really great art to a country area and helping them educate them to what actually art. In that regard, Mimi's artwork was a real, it was great to have here in Albany.
I've always been interested in the metaphorical and the physical sense of the fold, the materiality of the fold. So, I mean, it's kind of very much in connection to my existing practice. But also I'm really interested in this idea of the compression of the space and the expansion of the paper space, and just the portability of something, like a drawing, like a work on paper.